In this episode of the School Podcast, we have Dr. Chris Baker. Chris was a teacher and worked in education for 20 plus years, developing students, staff in schools and also on a trust level. Pretty much if you work in schools or education, I believe everyone can benefit from this episode. And thank you once again for Gadgetline for making this happen. They make world-class videos for schools and pictures as well for just under 7K guaranteed. Check them out and let's get into this episode. Dr. Chris Baker.
Can you believe it?
Thank you for attending the School Podcast. How are we doing today?
Yeah, I'm living the dream, I am, yeah.
In short, for everybody listening and watching, who is Dr. Chris Baker? Give me an elevator pitch.
Yeah. So Dr. Chris Baker is recently a doctor. He's a PE teacher, dad of two, challenge junkie, massive chip on my shoulder from when I was a kid that I've been trying to get rid of ever since.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good start.
Okay, we'll dive into that for sure. But of course, can you give us a quick overview of your educational career to where you are now?
Yeah. So 22 years in education. So started as a PE teacher, John Cabot Academy in Kingswood.
John Cabot, okay.
Yeah. The head at the time was David Carter. Went on to be National Commissioner. I was young, single, enthusiastic, chip on my shoulder, surrounded by young, enthusiastic, people in a political climate where there seemed like a lot of money, with a leader that gave a lot of freedom, who was inspiring, and so moved through the levels of leadership into different roles quite quickly because I was, head above the parapet, the yes man, always leaning forward, and David and the rest of the Cabot team was just feeding.
So how long was you there for?
So at Cabot,
being a PE teacher?
So I was PE teacher for about 7 years.
Okay, so personal question now.
Go on.
You probably know one of my very good friends.
Yeah, go on.
Who was a student at the time.
Nice.
Not to make you feel old.
Yeah.
You still got better hairline than me, so
Yeah,
don't worry
getting
about it. Samir Idrissi.
Oh yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay.
By name, definitely.
So Samir went on and got a scholarship, went to America, played American football.
Yeah.
Academically, just on point. Lives out in Los Angeles.
Does
now.
he? Yeah. Well, my claim to fame, I try and tell my son who's into rugby that I taught Ellis Genge.
Okay.
So I'm like, I was Ellis Genge's PE teacher, and it's loosely.
And I guess Mitch
Eady, all those boys, they all came through Cabot. And so I was PE teacher for a while, and then at an Inner Geek. And so I would regularly go to the IT team and sort of in this weird, almost like Matrix, if you've seen the movie Matrix, this style of me going in with no knowledge and saying things like, hey boys, what's this spreadsheet thing? And they would pull the blind down, teach me about spreadsheets. I'd walk out thinking, okay, I could use that in PE. And anyway, that went quite far because I started using technology in PE and it wasn't really the done thing at the time, and it ended up me winning a national teaching award.
Oh wow.
So I was Teacher of the Year, I think it's 2009, for new technologies, because I was using so much tech in PE and doing things like we would video the kids. I mean, it's now common, but back in the days, videoing someone, letting them see a video of themselves and then correcting their performance.
Analysing and
It was a game changer, We used to do things that then led me to be the leader of e-learning in John Cabot, which gave me my first kind of whole school responsibility. So we just spread it out, man. We were doing stuff in MFL where we would use, again, it's normal now, but we would use Google Docs to have students live on a document with a student in France. The student in France is writing English, and the English student is correcting the English. The English students write in French and the French students correct in the French.
So, when you first became a teacher, did you have aspirations to create new ideas and try different things and have aspirations to be in the position that you are in now? Or did it just naturally happen because you're naturally an ambitious person? So in a way you didn't really know what the goal was, but you knew, you didn't have a goal, but you just knew that you're going to work hard and see what happens pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that I bumbled through most of my life up until about 20, 20 years old.
Okay.
Just bumbling along, thinking, I wasn't unhappy, I didn't feel unconfident, but I was at a kind of underlying lack of confidence. And then there was this one moment that changed everything in a train station in Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Strange question, but I, up until that point, had been I'm from a normal background. My mum's worked in a post office, my dad fixes TVs, and my siblings and all the people around me are just normal people, quite low aspirations. And so I just had that, I just inherited those low aspirations. In my mind, I was going to go and fix things like my dad did.
So what happened in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, so I got the opportunity when I was about 18 to go to America to do one of those American summer camps.
Wow, okay.
And it was the first time out of the UK, first time kind of on a flight and all those.
So you've never been on a holiday?
Never been, none of that stuff. Never certainly been away on my own. Went there, did the kind of sports camp, taught football for a bit. And at the end, again, these people said, we're going to go travelling after camp. And I was like, man, it was enough for me to have the confidence to come to America. I'm going straight home to my mum.
Yeah.
This is enough for me. And they said, no, come on. I said, how are you going to get there? He said, we're going to get the train. And I thought, right. And at that point, I didn't want to show my lack of confidence. So I just said, okay. And so we went to the train station, and I vividly remember being in line, going up to the counter, and then them saying, we'd like to go to Miami. And she said, okay, yep. The train leaves at this time. It's going to be $150 and you'll get there in 2 days' time. Here are the stops. Okay, paid the money, got the ticket, got on the train, went to Miami. And in that moment, I thought, wow, that was easier than I thought.
So that was kind of one of the first times you've kind of opened your mind. And I'm a great believer that once you expand your mind, it never goes back to its original dimension.
Never.
And it's interesting that was the first time you've ever been on holiday, been on a plane, because as you can imagine, a lot of the teenagers I work with, they don't even have passports, they've never been on holiday,
Yep.
wouldn't even experience a caravan holiday, for example.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because you had an opportunity, you took it, but it opens your mind.
Yeah.
But now let's get into, because I think your experiences, and we're going to dive back, we're going to dive into it all, especially talking about parenting as well. So now at the moment, what are you in charge of in your current job?
Yeah, so my current role is with a kind of group of schools.
Yeah.
There's 35 schools, and my role is the leader of professional development and teaching and learning across those schools. So I act as kind of a guide, a critical friend, and a kind of provider of professional development for all of the staff in all of the schools.
Teaching and learning, professional development, what does that mean? What is it?
So, I mean, I think you could, professional development, you could say, is opportunities for people to increase knowledge, experience, skill, that sort of thing. Teaching and learning effectively is kind of helping teachers understand the teaching and learning process better, so that they can be better teachers, so they can create better lessons, so that students can get better experiences, so they can have better outcomes, so they can have better futures.
And what are some of the most common challenges teachers face in trying to develop and create better lessons?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Great question.
It is, yeah. I mean, like most of these things, man, it's bonkers complicated, isn't it?
Yeah. Is it though?
Yeah, I mean, I think any time you involve human beings in anything, it's complicated.
Yeah.
And that's one of the challenges, is that we know cognitively how learning happens, and we know on paper how a lesson should look and how the different components fit together and all that. But as soon as you add people together, and as soon as you add young people together, it becomes more complicated. But I mean, ultimately, there's this growth of adaptive teaching. You're basically trying to create experiences that take people from A to B, from their current level of understanding to a new level of understanding. That's kind of what we're trying to do, I think.
Do you ever see many teachers kind of experience complacency?
Yeah,
And
I mean,
how do you so when you first came into teaching, but even now from what we said previous to us recording,
yeah.
you're always kind of ambitious, you're always driving, you're always trying to improve. How do you kind of pass on that same mindset or level of expectation and standards to other teachers? And if a teacher's there thinking, do you know what, I feel like I've lost myself a little bit, I feel like I'm just going through the motions, I'm just showing up and delivering every day. Like, how do you combat that?
Yeah, again, it's not dissimilar to, working with young people in that, there's always something behind an adult's behaviour. Do you know what I mean? When we talk about why someone is not teaching the way they could teach, we've got to look at a couple of things, haven't we? We've got to look at will, and skill. So there's this idea of, has something happened to their motivation, their kind of interest, their whatever, or is it a skill thing? Are they not questioning as well as they could do because they don't know how to question very well? And I'm a big fan of, there's a guy called Peps McRae who does a lot of educational work, and he has the pyramid, which I kind of hold as a bit of a standard for me, in that he talks about, our mental model or our knowledge about something directs our behaviour, and then our behaviour directs our impact. And so if something's not having the impact, it's probably because we're not doing it right, and we're probably not doing it right because we don't know how to do it right. And so that's where professional development, I think, sits at this foundation of almost everything,
Many people on Twitter would argue that there's not always a reason behind poor behaviour.
Yeah, it's a challenge, isn't it?
And you've got two camps, really, haven't you, on Twitter when it comes to behaviour. Do you think there's always a reason, or do you feel like sometimes students may display poor behaviour just because they just do it? So I know, for my example, when I went through school, there was sometimes, and yeah, maybe you could still link it back to a reason of what I went through, but there was sometimes I was just being an idiot, just trying to get a laugh. Do you know what I mean? And there's certain students that I work with, I won't mention the school, but the young lad, he had a one-to-one with me. We did a session, then he went straight out and got kicked out of the class. And the head teacher brought him and said, "Cam, can you talk to him again? This is just what's happened." And he sat there. He said, "Cam, he said, I just can't help it." So I just did it. I don't know why I did it. I just can't help it. And then we tried breaking it down, and etc. etc. But yeah, what's your stance on that?
Yeah, well, I think there's two things. It'd be interesting to delve into that question a bit. For me, the idea is there's an issue whenever we say that there are two camps. I think any time that you're looking at the extremes of continuums is not helpful.
Interesting.
Very, very rare that there are any dichotomies that actually have value.
And do you think that's happened?
I think so, but I think it's not helpful when people say, either or.
Because you create an echo chamber as well, don't you? And when you're on one of the ends, you almost kind of you die on that hill, and you kind of stop having an open mind to discover new ideas, and maybe that is true. And that's when you kind of
because it's not quite as headline grabbing, and it's not quite as sexy, is it?
I like that, to be fair.
Well, it depends. I mean, I do a lot of executive coaching at the moment with leaders, and one of the things we do a lot of is interview prep.
ILM level 7?
Yep.
Plug.
And one of the fascinating things is when we talk about, what questions are you most nervous about, they say things like, I'm not sure what my leadership style is.
Okay.
And that's quite a classic question. What's your leadership style? And that itself suggests that there are good or bad leadership styles, when the reality is the answer to that and to most of those questions, like is behaviour conscious or unconscious, is, well, it depends.
Nice. I like that.
It's almost like you could go through most things and say, well, it depends. And of course, it's not a very sexy answer, and it's probably not the answer that the person wants, because what they want is clarity.
Because you could look at certain times when I was just trying to get a laugh. Okay, why did Cameron want that attention? Was it because his mum kicked him out when he was 11? Yeah. So you could but at the time, it was just because I was trying to make people laugh.
Yeah.
But I guess it depends.
It does depend. But it's fascinating to go back to why you were trying to make people laugh.
Yeah, that's what I mean, yeah.
So for me personally, I was exactly the same as you.
Yeah.
And I see it in my son as well, which is a scary thing for me to watch him become me, you know. But for me, I made people laugh in the lessons where I didn't recognize it, but I was underconfident.
Wow, okay.
So if you look at me in a PE lesson, don't need to make people laugh, because I can be the alpha because of my sports team. Put me in a maths class, I ain't the alpha anymore. I've dropped down, in my mind, the social hierarchy, and I got to find a way to get back up there. I can't do it with my maths, so how can I do it? I'll make people laugh. And of course, we have this weird thing where we repeat the behaviors that give us what we want. Now, I wanted social recognition and acceptance and hierarchical climb. So me telling a joke in the middle of a maths lesson that makes people laugh gives me what I want. And so unfortunately, that's a reinforcing cycle, you know. So yeah, dangerous stuff.
That's from a student's perspective. What can teachers do to support that?
Yeah.
How do you combat that? So
again, I think
you can have really
it's really interesting, isn't it? Oh, yeah. This again will set Twitter on fire.
And I guess, just as you said, it depends.
It does depend.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge, is I think, unfortunately, people are complex. Understanding people takes time. And most teachers, sadly, don't have time. Either that's a perception or a reality, but to unpick the reasons why Cam Parker makes people laugh is going to take time, you know. And from my experience as a teacher, and again, I'm not an expert on behaviour by any means, that when I took the time to understand a student, it made me able to teach that student better. And not just understanding how they learn, but understanding who they are, understanding their background, understanding where this stuff might have come from. I wish I could go back and speak to myself and say that, you know, why do you feel the need to make people laugh in my
Is that the
class?
teacher's job to do?
It's difficult. I mean, this is another story, isn't it, about what's in and out of a teacher's job now, because I think, again, most of us feel like more and more things are becoming our job. But I mean, for me, knowing kids at that level is where the joy of teaching is, you know? That's where knowing that so-and-so's favourite wrestler is this, or knowing that they play football for this on the weekend, being able to connect with them on a personal level is what, for me, gives me the joy. It's relationships. It's you know, and that.
Can you measure that?
Can you measure a relationship?
Can you measure just everything you're talking about?
It's interesting, isn't it? I say interesting a lot. It's one of my cognitive, you know, those words you say when you're thinking.
Interesting.
But it is interesting. My kids at home say, Dad, when you say that, you're not listening. It's like my trigger. They catch me doing that. I'm a big fan. I'll talk about this. I mean, you mentioned off camera, Begin with the End in Mind, Stephen Covey. I read Stephen Covey's book when I was traveling, which maybe we'll go back into, but that moment in the train station.
You mentioned 2 books, what changed your life?
I mean, that train station led to 6 years of individual traveling.
Wow.
One moment, 6 years. Yeah, 2 books. Yeah, I mean, 2 books that changed my life. One, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I found that in a book exchange in the Amazon jungle in Bolivia.
Wow.
I remember vividly again, I had Dan Brown. Remember Dan Brown, Da Vinci Code? I had that, and I had to swap it. And I was like, it's going to need to be good to swap for Da Vinci Code. And everything else was in all kinds of different languages. I saw this 7 Habits book, gave it a little flick. The words were a lot smaller than I was used to reading. A few pictures, so I gave it a try. And Covey's idea of this emotional bank account thing has stayed with me forever. And I talk about it as often as I can, this idea. And since then, people like Brene Brown has talked about marbles in a jar. That, you know, every time we meet someone, we set up an imaginary bank account. And every interaction from then on is either a deposit in the account or a withdrawal from the account. And what you're effectively doing when you look in that account is you're looking at how much stored relational credit. And then on the scary side, we unconsciously check the level of credit before we do anything for people. So if we take a student example, those teachers that proactively make deposits then have credit to use later on. But yeah, I'm addicted to that idea.
Why?
I think it's because, for me...
Has that idea not worked for you?
How has it not worked?
I said, has it not worked for you at times?
I mean, the game changer for me was that relationships are not passive things. You have to work hard at them. So you have to proactively deposit. You have to go about your daily life thinking, I need to deposit in these accounts if at some point I want to make a withdrawal. It's massively helped me.
I guess that requires consistency.
Consistency, it requires knowing people as well. We go back to that idea of me as a kid comes into my lesson knowing that they had a cup football game at the weekend, and me being able to say, hey Johnny, how'd you get on in the cup game at the weekend? Deposit.
How do you still manage your ideas and your kind of philosophy? And we'll talk about your doctorate in a minute, but obviously you're not teaching nowhere near as much as you once was. Even though we talked once again before the camera, you saying go into certain places and you help out wherever you can, walk in corridors. Has any of like your philosophies changed over time, and how do you keep like implementing them to ensure they are working?
Yeah, we're talking philosophies about teaching
just
or
everything
anything
we've kind of covered, because there's a difference, isn't it? Kind of sometimes a difference between theory and actually kind of reality.
Oh, massively. And
how do you continue to say it with your chest?
Yeah.
Because you speak so open, you're very honest, but you also really do believe what you talk, but with a massive open mind at the same time. But how do you continue to practice these theories? Pretty much, I guess I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that we probably misjudge how different students are from adults, in that a lot of my work, a lot of the lessons I've learned through, making relationships with students, I now use to make relationships with adults. So if we talk about my role is at a distance, leading people in 35 schools that don't have to listen to me. I'm not their line manager, I'm not their boss, nothing like that. So it's all about relationships. But again, with 35 schools, I have to be conscious of the fact that I have to make deposits. So I have to constantly be, adding value to all of these accounts by saying thank you, recognizing, providing opportunities, those sorts of things. The joy for me now is that I get to have an even bigger impact. So whereas as a teacher, it was me in one class, you go up into kind of senior leadership and maybe you've got a department or a school. Now I work with the senior leaders of my schools, and they work with the middle leaders, and the middle leaders work down there.
You talked about experiencing a huge amount of self-doubt growing up, and you also mentioned at the start of this podcast having a chip on your shoulder. Being a keynote talker, sharing all the wisdom, the knowledge you do online through blogs and hopefully one day a book. Do you still experience self-doubt? And like you've said, Twitter would go wild. Does that ever concern you sometimes, being criticised for your beliefs and your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, constant self-doubt. Another book that I didn't find in the Amazon, but since reading Professor kind of Tim Peters, The Chimp Paradox, that again changed my life. This idea that we have this kind of almost irrational, emotional, aggressive chimp voice, and then we have this kind of human voice, this is the kind of rational side. My chimp is out of control and really loud all the time. the chip is still very much there.
How did you feel coming today?
Yeah, I mean, this is the first face-to-face kind of, podcast I've done. I've done a few things online, but, even this morning thinking, will I be the person I want to be? Will I be as eloquent as I want to be? And all those sorts of things. You got the chimp saying things like, yeah, you might have a doctorate, but you're not a real expert. And, remember you've only got 2 GCSEs, and remember this, and remember you're from Wormley, you're from Kingswood, remember your accent, you sound like a farmer, all that sort of stuff.
How do you silence the chimp?
Well, I mean,
how do you?
How do I do it? I just provide it like the Chimp Paradox book says, I just provide it with evidence. When the chimp says you're not good enough, I say, yeah, sadly, I've got, 2 wonderful children, I've got a doctorate, I'm a double Ironman triathlete.
You didn't put that in your bio.
Well, I'm not a very good triathlete, but I've got all kinds of stuff that's said.
Any advice for Dave? He's got a marathon on the weekend.
Oh, there you go.
His first one.
Slow and steady, man. Don't,
That's his only option anyway.
The same thing with the Ironman. If you're not there to win it,
yeah,
just take your time.
Remove your ego.
Just remove the ego and just kind of run your own race. But yeah, I just give it the facts and I say, sorry, mate, you might be chirping away over here, but I've got all kinds of evidence to say that you're wrong. So back in your box.
So, talk to me about your doctorate.
Yeah. So this is again bonkers fascinating, in that
it's pretty cool being called doctor, surely.
It's pretty cool. My son, who I was hoping would see me then as some hero, is very quick to remind me and anyone else who'll listen that I'm not a real doctor. I'm a paper doctor.
It's interesting, and even when we talk about kind of cultural capital of our students and stuff, and when I went to university, I was the first one in my family to ever go.
Yeah.
And I always remember one of my first lecturers, and she's a friend to this day, Dr. Harriet Short.
Right.
And I remember it was a business course. I remember she came in and I said, my name's Dr. Harriet Short. And I was thinking, a doctor?
Yeah.
I was thinking, why is a doctor teaching me? Why is a doctor teaching me business?
Yeah.
But what I wasn't aware of, there was, and I was in university.
Oh, man.
And
crazy. Yeah, I mean, basically, this chip, I've been trying to, get rid of it ever since, and I've been trying to find something, because where all this comes from is I'm not proud of my efforts up until about 20 years old. I'm not proud of the way I lived my life up until that point. So since then, I've been desperately searching for ways to feel proud about myself and to achieve something that I could say, shut up, chimp, And so I did the degree, like lots of people.
Sorry.
Carry on, yeah.
What did you need to do different up until you were 20?
Be confident.
Feel proud.
Yeah, be confident. That's the game changer. If I imagine, we'll talk about this later because it's part of the new book. But this idea of a circle, what I call a self-efficacy circle. If I think about my circle when I was a kid, it was really close to me. The things I thought I could do and the things I couldn't do, the things I thought I could do were really close. Everything else was out of reach, and that controlled a lot of my choices when I was a kid. So if we talk about my journey through secondary school, everything was sports related, and not because of a love of sport. And this is where it gets weird, is that I did sport because I was good at sport. Mm-hmm. I didn't do sport because I liked sport. When I got to A-levels, I chose loads of sports courses, not because I liked sport, because I was good at sport, and I didn't think I was good at anything else. The real game changer, and this is proper, sensitive stuff, is I became a PE teacher because it was easy. Mm. I didn't become a PE teacher because I loved PE. And that's frightening. And that stayed with me. That's pretty raw, that is.
You clearly think a lot. Are you still not proud of your first 20 years of your life?
Yeah, I'm still working hard to erase that. I think I've done,
So I think I'm a massive believer in perception in many ways.
Yeah.
So like everything in life is just an event. It's the kind of the meaning you give that event.
Massive.
What shapes, however you take it.
Yeah.
So like, I guess there's 3 different kinds, isn't there? There's the to me people, so life happened to me.
Yeah.
A little bit more of a kind of victim mindset.
Yeah.
Then you've got, then you kind of got like the for me, but I forgot the other one now.
Yeah. It's that
But
agency thing,
ultimately,
yeah.
like what the point I'm trying to make is, what you went through, that was for you to be the person that you are now.
Yeah.
And the job and everything and the impact that you're having now.
Yeah.
And maybe if you was this really outgoing, confident young man in your teens, you might not have been doing what you're doing now.
Yeah,
Do you understand? So it's like, I think sometimes we got to reflect, and I was really hard on myself, especially through like my teenage life and all the struggles I went through.
Yeah.
But actually I look back on that, and that was kind of for me to be the person I am now, for me to be the father I am today, to be as hard working as I am today.
Yeah.
So like when you say, I wasn't proud of that person, is it just 1, because you got high expectations, or 2, actually we've not really broken it down? And if you was in a position that you're in now, what would you say to somebody under the age of 20?
Yeah.
What does success actually look like?
Yeah. I mean, I think that moment in the train station was the change from me being a person where life was doing to me, and me taking control of my life, and this idea that, wow, I can do stuff that is out of my kind of current perceptions of a capability, and I'll be okay. And so since that was the game changer, and since then I've just been, as I joked about at the beginning, this challenge junkie where I'm trying to find the boundaries of this circle, and I just can't find. I mean, this is proper arrogant, but I can't find the boundary.
So your doctorate?
Doctorate, yeah. So
what was it on?
Did a doctorate in what they call leadership self-efficacy, so leadership confidence, basically. Okay. So it's worth just, setting that, if we're going to talk about this, I thought, one way to understand what self-efficacy is and how it's different from other things is, let me ask you a question, right? So out of 10, how confident a person are you? Just give me a number, no blurb.
6.
6, good. Okay, so that's you as a person. Now I'm going to give you a couple of different, I'm going to ask you about your confidence in some more specific things, and just give me a score, okay? So let's go podcasting.
6.
6. Algebra.
4.
4. Sports.
7.
Cooking.
5.
DIY.
2.
Okay. So we see here, don't we? We already get this idea that there's this idea of confidence, and then there's specific confidence, right? So let's take sports. Let's do some different sports. So let's go out of 10, confidence in running.
5.
5. Football.
6.
Swimming.
1.
Okay. So again, we're getting smaller and smaller, and that's the difference between confidence and self-efficacy, is that it's really, really specific. The godfather of this self-efficacy thing is a guy called Albert Bandura. He did all the work on early work back in the 70s and 80s. But effectively, the phrase I've started using is self-efficacy is task-specific confidence. Okay? So it's not global confidence, it's task-specific. So if we talk about a student would have a self-efficacy level different for maths, English, science, history, geography. But within maths, they'd have a different level for algebra, geometry, arithmetic, whatever else, okay? And so that's the kind of the study that I was interested in. I was interested to think, how confident are leaders, and in what elements of their role are they more or less confident in? All with the view that if we want to provide good professional development for leaders, we kind of need to know what they are or not confident in. Now, of course, the thing that's really fascinating is that I started a doctorate with very low academic self-efficacy. So I was doing a doctorate in self-efficacy whilst not having very much self-efficacy. And during the process of doing the doctorate in self-efficacy, I became more confident in doing a doctorate.
Interesting. I just want to take a quick moment to thank one of our school podcast sponsors, Access Education. The guys at Access Education are on a mission to give every school the freedom to put education first. And they do this by bringing all your software needs into one place. Whether it is financial management, HR, payroll, parent communication, or classroom content and assessments, they have you covered. They work with over 9,000 maintained schools, academies, MATs, and independent schools across the UK. On another note, I've personally worked with Access Education for a number of years. The team, the work they're doing is unbelievable. So hit all the links in the bio, check them out, and yeah, let's get back to this podcast. If people experience that though, why did you still start?
Well, again, this is Bandura. We'll talk a lot about him, but he talks about, how do you develop self-efficacy? So one of the things he talks about is our past experiences directly affect how we feel about future performance. So again, if I ask you about your swimming, why did you give it a 1?
Just because I don't swim.
You don't swim?
Don't swim. Not scared of water.
No.
Just don't.
No?
Yeah, just.
But you know that swimming is possible. You've seen other people do it.
Yeah.
But you've had, when you've swam before, it hasn't gone well?
Just don't try. Just go into a pool where I can touch the bottom and might swim to the side and jump in and do a couple of bombs and swim back to the side and.
Sure.
But.
Yeah. So there's something about self-efficacy that if you don't have lots of experience, it naturally declines.
Yeah, of course.
Over time. So if you don't do something for a long time, you're naturally underconfident. Let's pick something else that you chose. Pick one that's low because of negative experiences.
DIY.
Okay, talk me through that.
Just can't even put something up IKEA, still get it wrong.
Still get it wrong.
So
that's the way that self-efficacy works, If we do something and it has a negative impact, it dents the self-efficacy. It's a bit like the emotional bank account thing. Every time you fail at something, you take a marble out of the self-efficacy jar, And if you keep getting things wrong, you keep taking marbles out, And so when you then go back and someone says, hey, Cam, could you come around and put up a curtain rail? You instantly look into your jar and go, no, because it's empty.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whereas if you looked in that jar and it was full up, then you'd be like, yeah, I can do that.
Is there a difference between caring and not caring though? So if it was DIY, I don't care. I don't care to improve it. So it doesn't really impact me at all.
Yeah.
Where there might be a certain activity where I might score low, but I really care about it. Does that then, what's the impact of that? So my confidence is extremely low. I'm not, but I want to be good at it.
Yeah.
How do you overcome that?
Well, that's the scary thing, I think, when we think about how self-efficacy affects young people, is that we typically don't do things that we have low confidence in. If you don't have very much confidence in running, you just don't go running. But that makes you worse at running. So your swimming thing ain't ever going to get better unless you start swimming.
Of course.
But that's frightening for me that I didn't choose to study history as my options in year 9 because I didn't have very much confidence in history. And so that meant that I was never going to get better at history because I wasn't going to go and do it. But so what we've got to try and do, if we don't care about something, is to, and we do want to develop it, is you've got to put yourself in positions where you can be successful. And maybe we'll talk about that at the end, because again, you talked about the book and it's nearly finished now actually, and the end chapter is about something I call the confidence code, which is almost like a kind of systematic process to becoming more confident in something. But maybe that's something we could kind of dip into later,
Is there a difference between confidence and just complete delusion and ignorance?
Yeah.
So you might ask me a question, Cam, where do you score yourself in football? I'd say, solid 8.5. But then you watch me and you go, that's dreadful.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
could it even be in a classroom? You just said to a teacher, what do you rate yourself here? And they'd be like, a 9, and you observe the lesson, you're like,
Yep.
that's not a 9. Where
What's
does
going on there?
delusion and ignorance and
Well, this is again,
I guess measuring it and the accuracy of that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes self-efficacy, like most kind of internal things, really complex because it's a personal perception. So that's a good thing. Certainly in a coaching setting, it's a good thing because, of course, your chimp is telling you you're not good at swimming. But as a coach, I could help you unpick your perceptions.
Probably in reality, if I answered that again, I'm probably a 3 or 4. Like,
Again,
a 1 would probably be you just can't swim at all. Where I could still go into the sea and But
so there's that side of things which is kind of is useful. But you're right that there is a bit like a bell curve in that no confidence is not great, but overconfidence is equally damaging.
Okay.
It's called, in the literature, sometimes called hyper self-efficacy.
Do you see that in your profession?
Yeah, I mean, in leadership circles, they call it hubris, where a leader is so confident that actually they are oblivious to lots of things. I mean, when we talk about self-efficacy and hyper self-efficacy, it has some fairly negative kind of impacts. If you are overconfident, you tend to plan less. You don't feel like you need to prepare or plan. I don't need to do that. I can do it. You tend to overreach in terms of goals. So potentially, again, we could talk about this later on, but goal setting is one of those things where low goals aren't great, over-ambitious goals are equally not great. So they set over-ambitious goals, they don't plan very much, they don't tend to collaborate a huge amount. Because if you're overconfident, you don't feel like you need help from anyone. So you tend to go on your own. And so, being overconfident is probably equally as damaging as underconfidence.
When you started your journey on becoming a doctor, diving into it, building up your self-efficacy and confidence in the area of kind of academia, what were some of the breakthroughs you experienced?
Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting it's occurred a couple of times, and it's always led to a jump in my self-efficacy. There's this idea of being around other people that have either higher aspirations or higher self-efficacy than you, and feeling like you belong. So if we go way back, that idea of me going traveling and being around people that weren't scared like I was scared made me feel like it was actually possible. If you see somebody else complete something, we call it vicarious influence. So if you're around other people that can do stuff, it gives you a sense that it can be done.
Peer groups.
Peer groups.
That's how you modify your behaviour to get accepted.
Exactly, and this is where my journey changed. If you think about my peer group, living in Warmley was this small, and we all thought the same, and without knowing it, we all had similar aspirations. Okay. Suddenly I go to summer camp, and there are people saying, I'm going to Bolivia next week. I'm going here, I'm going there. So my peer group has suddenly changed. Expanded my mind, because what I thought was possible is now expanded. Because I'm sat there thinking, you ain't that much different to me. And yet, why can you do that? Now, the doctorate is another example where the way I did it was a part-time doctorate where you had 2 years of taught kind of sessions, and then you had however many years it took to do the project. But again, I attended those sessions with low self-efficacy academically. I'm sat in the session, and I remember vividly again sitting there, and they're all talking at quite a high level, and I'm thinking, I don't belong here. And so they're going around the room, and people are putting their hand up and they're making suggestions, and I'm thinking, I ain't saying a word, because I can't take the risk that I'll say something and people they wouldn't laugh because they're adults, but I can't take the risk that what I say is dumb, because I won't recover from that. So do you know what? It's safer for me just to keep my hand down. And I continued that for a while, and then I thought, because of course I was quite far into my journey by then, 6 years solo traveling, all kinds of stuff. So I wasn't that kind of timid, underconfident kid that I used to be, but I still wasn't where I am now. And I remember vividly just thinking, okay, I understand that. I think I got something to say. I thought, just go for it, man. So I put my hand up. He said, Chris, what would you say? I said something. They went, and then around there, everyone's like, man, that's a great point. Yeah. What Chris just said, exactly what he just said. And I thought, what? Oh my God, maybe I do belong. And we talk about this idea, didn't we, that our past experiences drive our future experiences. That was all I needed. The next session, when I thought I had something to say, I put my hand up. And again, it was good. So another jar, another marble. My confidence grew and grew and grew. And I thought, do you know what, actually,
but
maybe I do belong here.
But what if you don't put your hand up?
This is the problem. You stay
so
where
like if you are in a room where people do have ambition and growth and they, the peer group, we've looked at the positive side, you stretched and you became them, you opened your mind. Mm-hmm. But what if the opposite happens?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things there again. The first thing is, if you don't put your hand up, your circle never grows.
Wow. And
we're talking figuratively and actually putting your hand up. If you don't reach out of your circle, then the circle never grows. This idea of a self-efficacy circle where the things that you can do are inside and the things you can't do are outside, the circle doesn't grow unless you reach out and grab one of those things and be successful and pull it into the circle, So for me, the Ironman is a classic example. I'm same as you. Swimming, a 2, maybe a 3. Breaststroke, sign me up all day long. Head above the water, got it. Front crawl, couldn't think of anything worse. Ironman, 2.4 miles of swimming. That's an hour and 20 minutes of front crawl. What? No chance. Can't do it.
Do you have the Ironman tattoo? There it is.
Got three to complete.
Wow. Oh, okay. Nice.
I've done 2 now. Too cheap nice. To get the other one filled in yet. But yeah. And so what I did was I wanted that challenge. I said to a friend of mine was a triathlete, and I said, I'm pretty fit. I've done blah, 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 blah. What's the hardest thing you can do? And they said, Ironman. I said, well, I can't swim. And they said, well, you can learn to swim. You don't, just because you can't do it now, you don't mean you'll never be able to do it. It's going to take effort, but you've got to go and. And so I went and I tried, and I'm still a terrible swimmer. My wife's a swim teacher, and she can't even watch me swim. My stroke is so ugly. She says, it hurts my eyes to watch you swim.
But you got around, you did it.
I don't care, So yeah, so it's reaching out and grabbing those things. And so for me in that doctoral situation, suddenly I had had a positive experience, which led to me putting my hand up even more. Positive experience. But if we go back to classrooms, one of the big things that we need to do as teachers, as leaders, or as anyone who's working with kids is to somehow give them the confidence to put their hand up once.
Because then they develop the competence, and when you start becoming good at things, you want to start kind of doing it more.
Yeah, and I mean, you do the same as I do. We get to go and watch. It's such a privileged position to be in, to go and watch teachers in all kinds of classrooms. And sometimes when I watch from afar, which is again a luxury that lots of teachers don't have. Teaching in the moment is crazy, but sitting back and you see these kids, and you almost I can see me in them, and that they are thinking to themselves, should I go for it? Should I take the risk? Should I put my hand up? And the scary thing is, and I talked to a lot of teachers about this, is you have the power to either build that person's confidence or erode it. When they do put their hand up, and maybe it's wrong.
But could you, from a teacher's perspective, say 2 + 2, who's got the answer? Put your hands up. They say, actually, Chris, you don't have your hand up. What do you think?
Yeah, very delicate. You've got to know your kids really well to know whether or not that's something that's going to damage their confidence or boost it. you know. But you're right. Yeah, I mean, if you know
But
your
if you
kids,
kept practicing that, then would that potentially lead to hands going up? So one thing that I try and avoid in everything is I do not accept, I don't know.
Yeah.
Naturally, what do you want to do when you're, I don't know.
Yeah.
What's this? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. What's your 3 biggest challenges right now? I don't know. And I say, sorry, like I'll wait here all day if I have to.
Yeah.
But I'll come back to you. But just know I don't accept I don't know.
Yeah.
Because when I say, as soon as we say I don't know, you give yourself permission to stop finding the answer, and you're never going to grow from there.
No.
You're never going to improve from there. So it's easy to say I don't know than it is to actually give it a go.
Yeah. I mean, that again is fascinating. I wonder, for lots of kids, the I don't know is I'm not confident enough to tell you. You know, what do you want to be when you grow up? I don't know. Hold on. Let's unpick it.
Yeah.
You do know, you just don't want to tell me because I don't know.
Or you've not fully dived into it and your initial reaction is, I don't know. It's easy. If he asks me, I'm going to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's easy. Stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
Let's do something else.
Yeah.
So it's like this kind of the psychology behind it. Like, and, you know, I always talk about what's your language. And when you do say, I don't know, you stop. Everything stops. You stop trying, you stop thinking.
Yeah.
And I don't know. So it's about diving into that. And
it is, you know, and if we go back to this idea that, you know, our confidence is largely based on our past experiences and whether they were successful or unsuccessful, then how we deal with somebody putting their hand up and taking a chance dictates on whether they'll take a chance again in the future. So if you took it to the extreme and you had a kid who was reluctant to answer questions, you set up a situation where they felt confident enough to have a go, they had a go, and then you praised them publicly, gave them whatever postcard, called home to say, just wanted to let you know I'm unbelievably impressed by John today because he took a risk. Guess what? John will take a risk again. You know, how we, and sadly, and I don't see this very often, luckily, but you could have the opposite, couldn't you? Johnny puts his hand, let's say Sarah puts her hand up, has a go, and the teacher says, no, don't be ridiculous. Sarah, Jane, what do you think? Now that's, she may never put her hand up ever again. And that's the scary power that, that exists with that.
Is there not an element of that's life though?
What, mean getting things wrong or?
You're getting things wrong, but also people are going to laugh at you at times.
Potentially, yeah.
And how do you for our young people in particular, so it's like, that's not my belief by the way.
Yeah, sure.
But it's just at some point it's like, just got to get on with it.
Yeah.
And how much, I guess, my next question is, a couple questions here. How much does confidence impact mental health?
Yeah.
But then also, you're kind of rating yourself when it comes to self-efficacy and confidence.
Yeah.
How much is that dictated by your current mood? So on one day, you might feel tired, you've been up all night with children, you've had a bad experience, your dog's just died. So if someone says, I don't know, 5.
Yeah.
How confident? I don't know, 4.
Yeah.
So I guess, is it okay to move? Is it common for it to change and move and adapt? And I don't really know what my question is there.
No, I get it. I think the marble in the jar idea, although we don't usually use marbles in a jar for self-efficacy, but it seems to work, this idea that you've got amount of credit in a million jars. You've got a swimming jar, you've got a running jar, you've got a DIY jar, you've got a cooking jar, and each of them's got various levels. I think it's helpful to think of the fact that, that credit goes up and down, and you do fail. And that is a jar, that is a marble out. But as long as there's credit in there, we're still good to go, So this idea that your life is a bit of a roller coaster and confidence is a bit of a roller coaster, and it will be deposit, withdrawal, deposit, withdrawal. The other classic thing to think about, and I don't think Covey talked about this, but that, of course, different deposits are different sizes. That's a really interesting idea that if I think about my Ironman deposit, that's massive in terms of sports because it's really, really difficult. You know, what I talk about in the book, I talk about this idea that the things are further out of your circle than others. You know, so let's think of a sports-related one. So a 5K is inside your circle, a 10K is on the edge of your circle, a half marathon would be further out, a marathon would be further out, and then an Ironman would be way, way, way out. But potentially there's this idea that each item has its own gravity, in that when it does come into the circle, it pulls with it things that are closely associated. So interestingly, by reaching way out of your circle, you also then get a chance to bring in the things that are less than that. So if we use the Ironman as an example, if I hadn't run a marathon, and I hadn't run a marathon before I did my first Ironman, I reached so far out of my circle to grab Ironman, pulled it in, and of course what came with it was everything less difficult than an Ironman. So if you say to me, can you do a marathon? I say, yeah, I can do a marathon, because I did a marathon after cycling 112 miles and after swimming 2.4 miles. So by pulling the Ironman in, I also pulled in marathon, half marathon, 10K, 5K, whatever. You know, just the other day, someone said to me, Chris, would you write an article for our journal? I said, yeah, no problem. And they said, it's quite a big article we need. It's about 8,000 words. Is that going to be okay? Yeah, because my doctorate was 66,000 words. So anything less than, I reached way, way out of my academic circle. I pulled doctorate in, and now anything less than that is in my circle.
How much does external factors impact your self-efficacy and confidence?
Yeah.
For example, your self-efficacy and confidence would have developed and improved writing this book. But what if nobody buys it?
Yes, yeah, massively. There's another one, you know, again, this...
Or is everybody different?
Of course, that is that an unsexy answer of, well, it depends. We're all complex, everyone's different. Like you said, on a day-to-day basis.
I guess it's understanding what the result really is.
It is.
Is it selling the books, or is it getting the book done?
Yeah.
Same as, is it winning the Ironman, or is it just completing the Ironman?
Yeah.
And now my confidence for myself has increased because I've changed my perception as well of kind of what success is, but also what hard work really is.
Yeah.
So back when we first met, probably 10, 12 years ago, when I first ever started speaking, I was all about the hard work. Hard work is the answer for absolutely everything. Hard work, you can make anything happen. It don't matter what background, doesn't matter. Hard work is the answer. No excuses, hard work. But actually now within time, hard work is 100% a factor. But hard work still doesn't guarantee success. It increases your chances.
Nice.
So I can work very, very hard, but I still might not get to certain areas. But working hard certainly increases my chances. So
I mean, I think, again, to go back to Covey, for me, is, you know, a game-changing book. But that idea of private victories versus public victories, and private victories must precede public victories, has stayed with me, in that I rarely do things now for a public victory. If that comes, great, but it's about private. So the book is a good example. I would like it to sell lots of copies, but that's not the driving force. As long as I'm happy with the book, then that's good.
Because even if you broke it down, a lot of it might not come down to whether the book's good or not. You know it is. It might just come down to your marketing might have been a little bit off, or other things may have happened.
Well, the Ironman, again, is another good example in that, and it's the other way around, which is, I joked about having 3 stars because I did the first one, and although I was called an Ironman and everyone knows that, you know, I've got that kind of, you know,
Chris Baker, you are an Ironman.
That sort of thing, I wasn't happy with my performance.
Okay.
And that was...
That's quite hard to take.
Really hard to take, because it was
you achieved it, everyone's buzzing for you.
Everyone's buzzing, everyone's talking
down,
about it.
Well, I could have done a little bit better.
Because remember, it mirrors how I feel about my early life. I didn't reach my potential. It's not it's not an indicator of my potential. So, another Ironman. 15 years between the Ironman. Did one at 30, did one last summer at 45. Just so I could finish one Ironman and think, that's as good as I can do it. Unfortunately, picked up an injury and again, completed it, but not happy.
Did you beat your time?
Beat the time by an hour and a half.
You're 15 years older.
Hour and a half off.
Hour and a half?
Yeah. But
What
still,
did you do it in?
So 12:20.
Wow.
But I think I'm a sub-11 Ironman.
All right, okay.
It's in there.
So I guess it comes down to, I don't know how accurate it is because I think I've seen it on the academic platform TikTok.
Oh yeah.
But it made sense to me, and that's why I'm sharing it with you, is because I heard when you share goals with people, you release like chemicals, like you've already achieved it.
Right.
And I've experienced that.
Right, tell me.
And it's funny because you're talking about the Ironman. So it was the last podcast that we shot, was with a world champion superbike rider called Scott Reddin.
Okay.
Famous guy, he's been in MotoGP, he's done all of this, he's into cycling and stuff. He actually cycled to my house to do the podcast at the time. But on that podcast, I was probably a lot heavier than I am now. I'm still, trying to find my way. But at the same time, I revealed on that podcast that I've signed up for an Ironman. Mm-hmm. Paid for it.
Nice.
£600.
Yeah, it's expensive. Yeah.
I'm doing an Ironman. He's like, wow, that's amazing. Congrats. Do you know what I mean? But I'm like, you can hold me accountable now.
Yeah.
Like, I'm doing it. But everyone was so impressed that I signed up to the Ironman.
Yeah.
I kind of got all the praise I needed. Mm-hmm. And I've started running and cycling. I've not even got into a swimming pool yet. No. So all these chemicals, like, I've done something. I've shared it. He's like, oh, well done. And then, life took over and I would say I quit or I just stopped doing it. But all that kind of chemical release, it was lost. Yeah. Which means maybe the goal was for somebody else. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't actually my goal for that time. Yeah. But I just know when I share goals, like it loses an element of...
Yeah, that is really interesting, isn't it? There's definitely something about...
It's like you've achieved it, but you haven't achieved it. Yeah. So like your body thinks you've achieved it, and you're getting all the benefits of it, but you've not actually done it.
And I would imagine it's something around the fact that you've taken the first step towards it.
But in reality, people say the first step's always the hardest. Not necessarily true. I sometimes think the last step's the hardest.
Certainly
so it's
is.
like when you're ready to send that book off finally get rid. It's like you got to slay. It's that art of resistance. You got to slay the dragon.
You sure have.
All the procrastination comes in the last 5%.
I'm living it right now, actually. In that I wrote the book in 2 months. So January the 1st. Wow. Well, January the 1st this year. I get up quite early, and I usually use that for exercise. But I decided, you know what? I'm just going to write. Because it seemed such a massive goal before. I didn't think I could do it. And interestingly, it does circle back to, you just need to start. And so I just sat down January 1st this year and just started writing without any expectations on whether it would be good or bad. And it was all right. Did 200 words. So the next day, did the same thing. And again and again and again and again. So I wrote the book, 82,000 words in 2 months. So up until the end of February. I can't even look at it at the moment. I keep going back to think I've got to go read it. I can't read it.
You almost had to go into a different place.
I'm not interested in it. This morning I got up to do something on it, and I found myself finding anything. Is there anything else I can do? So that's fascinating that I need to tell myself, right?
Because we're giving you the praise of writing this book, but actually,
it ain't finished.
Chris, it's not done.
It ain't finished. I've got to keep some momentum going, and again, the doctorate is a good example that those first 2 years are taught. And then you go off on this kind of solo journey. You just got to, you got to close it out, I suppose.
It's deep stuff.
It is, yeah. I mean, that's another real joy that I've had, and a frustration, is that I don't think that I'm a different person now to I was when I was a kid. I genuinely just don't think I allowed myself to do the stuff I do now. So I don't think...
I mean, if it makes you feel any better. You left school 30 years ago, mate.
Oh, don't get me on, don't. It's proper scary. The crazy thing for me, of course, and the luxury I have, and it's an absolute joy, is I teach and I lead and I do whatever in the schools that I was in. So like King's Oak Academy in Bristol, I work there, and I lived, and my parents still live, 100 metres from the school.
Wow.
So, and the accent helps in that situation, because there are these kids who are saying, "Here, sir, you sound just like us." And I say, "Yeah." Because come here, look out the window, that's my mum's house. And they go, "Shut up."
I egged that on Halloween.
Exactly. Oh yeah. But they say things like, you know, "What? And you're a doctor?" "Yeah." "Where did you go to school?" "The Grange School down there." What GCSEs did you get?" "I got two C's and the rest, God knows what." What about A levels?
So you saying that role modelling and modelling's important as well?
I think for me it's everything, because once you know someone who's done what you want to do, it makes it possible. The trick with, and this is where we can go into a bit more of psychology and the Bandura stuff, is that if we are creating models, if we're putting models in front of people to say, look, this can be done, we have to be very careful that there's, for one, posh word, congruence, so that the models are similar to the person. So there's something about self-efficacy development that is weakened when the model is different to us. So to give you an example, if I watched Roger Federer play tennis, I know that what he's doing is possible because I can see him doing it.
But you just don't relate to him.
Me and Roger Federer
you
are
right.
not the same. So it doesn't give me as much confidence. However,
you're right.
If I meet someone, and this happened to me, where I say, "Oh, I might do another Ironman," and the other person says, "Oh yeah, I've done 2 Ironman." And I say, "How old are you?" 47. "Oh right, I'm 45. What do you do for a job?" "Oh, I got a full-time job." Hang on a minute, we're the same. So it works for that, and for me, I'm a big fan, and it's difficult to get working, but I'm a big fan of peer modelling in classrooms. The default, of course, is that the teacher models how to get things done. Now that is powerful because it shows the student it is possible. But how much more powerful to have somebody similar to you
do you run the risk as the educator to potentially lower your standards and get on their level with some of their banter and some of like their terms and the ways they, do you understand? Like,
yeah, that's interesting.
So for example, a massive, in my sessions I run for boys in particular, they will test the water from the get-go.
Right.
Is he a lad?
Yeah.
Is he one of us?
Yeah.
Like, where can we push it?
Yeah.
And my standards and expectations are extremely high.
Yeah.
And I show them a different way and a different, but I will question on it. I won't avoid it.
Yeah.
What I think a lot of people would do in education, they avoid certain topics.
Yeah.
So why would you say that?
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, it really is fascinating.
It's like, but I think early days, I ran the risk of potentially lowering myself and my beliefs to try and build a relationship by being one of the lads to then hopefully try and, but actually in reality the impact of that was never, it was never productive long term, because when I tried to turn it back on, it didn't exist.
No. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Definitely another one of those continuum things.
And I think some people, I think that's a regular thing that happens.
I think you're right.
I see it in schools. I said, like, if you go and say, what's your 3 biggest challenges? It would be, sometimes write a teacher's name down. Most of the time, I don't even know who the teacher is.
Right.
And I say, okay, why have you? Because the teacher, he's always on my case, or she's always on my case. This, and this, and this. I said, so what you're ultimately saying is that teacher's got high expectations of you and you don't like it.
Yeah.
Well, I've not really thought of it like that. And sometimes teachers do pick on students, and we're all human. Sure. And some students do have targets on their head they may have developed over time. And I do believe it, and there kind of needs to be a new day and stuff. And but at the same time, it's like, you don't like, you only like the old head teacher because you used to be able to go on your phone, vape in the toilets and this. So actually what you're saying is you don't like the new head teacher because they hold you to a higher standard, which ultimately is going to prepare you for when you walk out the gate, which is ultimately going to provide you with better outcomes long term. And they're like, I guess,
Well, and how many people do we see come back afterwards and say, thank you for being so, strict?
Like my
or
key
so
message is if you just do what's easy now, the next 5 to 10 years, your life will be hard.
Massive.
Harder.
Yeah.
But if you do what's hard now,
Yeah.
it won't be easy.
No.
But there'll be opportunities there. So I guess back to, sorry, I went off on a bit of a tangent there. Back to is there a risk of, and do you see it, or is it, I guess when somebody's observing a lesson, you see the best of the teacher most of the time.
Yeah.
But is there a risk of kind of lowering yourself to the teenager standards?
Yeah.
And like, Miss lets me do it, or Sir lets me do it, but I can't do it in this class. Like,
there's definitely a challenge in schools, different expectations.
Where does that consistency come in?
Yeah, the consistency is, I think, a real
Sir's
challenge.
cool because he fist bumps me. Like, do you know what I mean?
That is, that's... And of course, you could probably go, it's probably more complex than that, in that teachers have different personalities, they have different, levels of comfort. I'm very comfortable with students knowing my first name. Some teachers aren't comfortable with that. I don't know where that comes from. It's not right or wrong. It's your own approach. But the other challenging thing is that that's not particularly helpful in an organisation to have different kind of expectations or different, it's not helpful for other teachers or for the kids to set yourself up as being different. That's a really tricky one, I think. And I
don't really know what point I'm making.
No,
but I think sometimes I see it.
It's seductive.
I see it, especially from the language that I hear from the students that I work with.
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm not saying it's always accurate what comes out of their mouth.
Yeah.
But their perception of things is accurate to them.
Yeah.
And I like coaching. I ask the questions. And
I mean, I think you're right.
And I won't. When I ask questions, I don't then try and put on my opinion.
No.
Because what does my opinion mean sometimes?
Yeah.
It's about creating this open environment where they ultimately hopefully find the answer for themselves.
Yeah.
But still now my standards and expectations are so high, and one of the elements of what we do, I'm all about performance in general, whatever that performance is.
Yeah.
Once again, I don't believe, and I think there was research on it, is that a lot of teenagers I work with, a lot of them, they don't lack aspirations. They might not know what they want to do, but they know what they want to have. But they lack the idea of knowing how to get there. And that's where I come into, I guess, like Steve Jobs, you can only connect the dots looking back.
Right.
But for me, it's trying to connect the dots for them.
Yeah. I mean, I did, one of my other jobs previously, I was in charge of teacher training for the Federation. And so the kind of collection of schools. So I've trained, I think, 316 trainee teachers over kind of 7 years. And that's a real challenge for trainee teachers, is how do I build relationships quickly with students? And I think you're right, it is potentially seductive to feel like I'm gonna be really, really chummy or friendly.
Especially if you're younger.
Younger, new in, you've got to make relationships as quick as possible. You want to make them as quick as possible because all you've been told is relationships. It's true. And so there is a danger, I think, that, and it takes a lot of strength, I suppose, to keep your expectations super high when you're trying to, I'm still find it now.
Especially if things are not quite working.
Yeah.
How do I get a quick win?
Yeah, I mean, I feel guilty. We talked offline about some of my work in schools is kind of at an SLT level and just helping to get kids back into lessons and those sorts of things. And sometimes I found myself feeling guilty about having to potentially lower expectations or lower standards temporarily for a greater good. So I'll give you a concrete example. A student out of a lesson, I speak to them and say, why are you out of lessons? They're angry, those sorts of things. I say, okay, we'll just take a couple of minutes, get you back regulated. I then go back and speak to them and they say, I no longer want to go to that lesson because I'm already 10 minutes late. I'll get in trouble, So that creates a challenge for me because I could, they have to go back into the lesson, both for that's the way that works, but also you can't learn anything if you're not in the lesson. So I want them in the lesson, but they don't want to go to the lesson. So what do I do? And I remember vividly, again, a couple of weeks back, saying to a student, hey, why don't you come with me? I'll take you to the lesson. And then if I say you're with me, you won't get in trouble. And that's morally a bit sketchy, isn't it? Because they should get in trouble because they're late. But again, in that instance, they came with me. I said to the teacher, look,
but that's not a situation what will happen every time.
This is the beauty of it. The girl went in, spoke to the teacher afterwards. How did it go? Amazing. Contributed, everything. Couldn't be happier. Saw her again 2 days later, straight into lessons.
I can't mention the school again, but we ran a power day, which is, we rarely run these one-off days, but I had about 8 speakers go to a school. The reason why we don't necessarily run it, and I'm always up front, is you can't really measure the impact. Right. It's great, but it costs a lot of money. Can't really measure the impact, but this is what we do. And there was clearly a challenge within the school when it came to behaviour. And I delivered a big speech at the beginning, all went well, then it was all set, they go into these different workshops. And one thing what kept happening, and actually Dave was there that day, if students was walking out and I was walking the corridors, checking everyone was okay, I guess kind of like your role now in a way. And I didn't know the students too well at this point, but I was like, where are you going? And I won't mention the name, but they said, we're just going to go see our head of year.
Right. Our
head of year's asked to see us. And obviously at that point I'm like, and that apparently after talking to the head teacher, that's been a common thing where they would just kind of get out a lesson and say they're going to see the head of year. So the head of years became like their friend, but not the leader of the year group, which actually is same as being a parent. I'm not trying to be friends to my children. They're going to always have friends. They're only going to have one set of parents or two sets of parents, or whatever. So it's my job to be a parent, and I'm not always trying to be liked. You can't be.
That's important, I think. The thing that scares me a little bit is that we absolutely have to have people in schools that kids feel comfortable telling stuff to. That's, that scares me more than, kind of being too chummy or whatever. The idea that someone feels like they could come and speak to me about something that's bothering them is the game changer, because that sharing it or identifying it is the first step to change. It's really interesting when I think about, I talk to lots of leaders now about something called psychological safety. There's a lady called Amy Edmondson, who's a Harvard professor that did loads of work on this recently. And this idea of psychological safety being, as an individual, how safe do you feel being vulnerable? So when we look at it at a leadership level, how confident do your staff feel about admitting mistakes, asking questions, sharing ideas, or challenging you? So we can all think of teams that we work in and the leader. If we were in a meeting with that leader, how confident would we feel doing those things? Now it's the same thing with students. How confident do they feel saying, Miss, I don't really understand what you were just saying, or even, I don't agree with what, Sarah, Jane, Pete just said. So we have to create environments where people feel safe to be vulnerable, and for it to be the norm, or for it to be okay for people not to be okay. And that's a massive thing for professional development. And what came out of the doctorate was that actually there's a real challenge in leadership in that leaders aren't supposed to be vulnerable. What? There's a stigma around a leader asking for help. But if you don't ask for help, then you don't get better. And that gets increasingly less the higher you go. So the higher you go in leadership, the less vulnerable you probably think you can be.
And I think that's what our previous guest, John Murphy, his goal is now, to try and even bring all CEOs together. Because he said, like, when he used to be a CEO, like you don't really communicate with other CEOs. It's not really something you do.
Yeah.
And I think even that whole idea works.
Yeah.
But
I mean, yeah.
go on.
And what I was going to say about, we talked a bit about the coaching. If anybody was ever going to push me on, what's the best form of professional development, coaching and mentoring. You cannot beat it for a number of reasons. You can't beat it.
So this is my next
Right,
kind
okay.
of question. So like kind of moving on in a way. What is the difference between coaching and mentoring?
Yeah, I mean that, again, we can set Twitter on fire with this. Because I think, again, we've got...
And is there an overlap?
Massively for me.
I think so.
I think so. I usually use the word helpful a lot when I talk about these dichotomies. I say, how is that helpful?
What is the two ends of the...
So if we take from my point of view, if we take the kind of stereotypical opinion, you've got mentoring is telling, coaching is asking,
But in reality, it's both.
And again, to make you feel better, the master's level academic research on it does not support the helpfulness of the distinction. There's some people who talk about this idea that actually there's a term in the middle, developmental dialogue, that actually, I read something recently where some guy said he wishes that the terms mentoring and coaching as a process never existed. I was interested about that, and I was thinking about that. And the way I explain it to people now is that in terms of helpfulness, I think it's helpful to see mentoring and coaching as a different person. So your mentor and your coach is a different person, okay? So at a people level, yeah, they're different. If you come down, we go a little bit further in that the relationship is different. So a coaching relationship is different to a mentoring relationship, fine. But if we come down to the aim of coaching and mentoring, pretty similar.
Interesting.
And then if you come down to the process, we get even closer, because effectively the process is a dialogue. And then the skills, I think, are almost the same. Now,
the way you explain things is really good, and I know you've taken a lot of time to be able to articulate these certain theories and how you process information.
Yeah.
But is there still a chance where we can overcomplicate things?
Massively.
Even in the academic world, even in education.
Yeah. I mean, the idea of complicatedness, again, is fascinating. And it goes back to, I think, what we talked about at the very beginning around why do people seek out these kind of dichotomies? Why do they want things to be either or? Well, they want them to be either or because that's simple. And we want things to be simple because we don't like having messiness up in our heads. They call it cognitive dissonance, where one piece of information clashes with another piece of information, and it causes not anxiety in what you'd think, but it causes as humans, we want things to make sense. And so we try to look for the simplest solution. But the reality is, there ain't very much that's very simple. Yeah. And so the mentoring coaching thing gained traction because you have a situation where someone says, what's the difference between mentoring and coaching? They don't want to hear you say, it's complicated. They want it the simplest thing. Mentoring's telling, coaching's asking. Oh, brilliant, thanks. I can stop thinking about that now. So it's quite seductive, that simplicity.
So if my last question, second last question, if Dr. Chris Baker had a magic wand to fix, improve, develop, change anything in education, what would it be? Because a lot of people external to education would say school's a waste of time. What's the point in learning certain things? You don't take it to adult life.
God, yeah.
Just if you could fix anything or improve anything, where would you start or what would you do? Anyway, guys, that's a wrap of the podcast.
This is my pensive thinking. Yeah, okay.
I know what you're going to say.
Go on then.
Depends.
It could depend, yeah. But what I'm not going to say, I'm going to stick my neck out on the line. I'm going to say, obviously, confidence. I wish everybody had more confidence. But I also wish that everybody felt safe to ask for help. Because you won't get more confident unless you do something, but you probably won't do something unless you feel safe to ask for help. So I think in classrooms, increasing safety, where kids feel safe to say, I'm not sure, I disagree, blah, blah, blah.
And how do you achieve that?
You have to reward bravery.
Culture,
It's the culture.
environment.
It's about, but again, it goes back to that literally thing of we repeat the behaviours that we get what we want from, or that are positive. So we need to set up a situation where a kid does something wrong and you celebrate them for trying. A kid takes a risk and you celebrate them for being brave.
Back to my point, sorry. If you didn't put your hand up but you chose the student to give you an answer, and that could be damaging,
Maybe, but
what if they get the answer right?
amazing, isn't it? And we know, don't we? We can actually do some stuff ahead of time. It doesn't have to be a surprise. I mean, a really subtle skill for teachers is to tell that person, I'm coming to you next.
Interesting, I like that.
Or to know them better and to say, hey, I got something during the lesson today which I think is right up your street. I'm going to come to you
But
for
what
a
if they
question.
turn around and say, no, I'm not going to answer, I'm not going to
That's it.
answer?
Again, you've got to look at it as a long-term project. You say, that's fine. Next week, how do you feel about answering a question today? Yeah, okay, I'll give it a try. They give it a try. Something positive happens, they'll try again. So I think, yeah, the magic wand is, again, where I'm working now is not in the classroom. Where I'm working, most of my work is with executive leaders. And the level and the lack of confidence, you would not believe. Even at the top levels, you would not believe how underconfident.
Is that because they are a little bit disconnected from the classroom?
It's because they got no one to talk to. They got no one to ask for help. There's a stigma around leaders asking for help.
Yeah.
They feel lost. They haven't had enough professional development. And this is where, again, to bang on about coaching and mentoring, we have to create these safe spaces where a leader can say, I'm really struggling here, you know, I need some help, and that's okay. Yeah, and that's the only way that we'll get kind of more confident people and be able to kind of, again, allow people to reach their potential and not feel like this boundary, this imaginary boundary is so tight. I think that's what I like to do with the leaders and the people I work with, is to smash those boundaries and to say that actually, yeah, there's loads of stuff out there that you can't do at the moment, but you just got to reach out, you know?
I believe this will be the first podcast of many I think we'll do. And to hold you accountable, when you release your book, we'll bring you back on.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of fascinating stuff in there.
And I'll give it a read and I'll pick you apart. And
well, I'll look forward to it.
And come with some really great questions to really dive into some of your deeper theories.
Yeah.
But Chris, where can people find you?
Yeah, so on Twitter, Dr. Chris WB, on LinkedIn, you know, Dr. Chris Baker. Yeah, Cabot Learning Federation is where I work.
You've also got a website as well, haven't you?
Website, yeah, Look Deeper, .wordpress.com.
Do you have a name for your book?
Yeah, it's called Confident Leaders by Design.
Confident Leaders by Design.
Yeah.
Amazing. Chris, thank you. And for everybody, thank you for tuning in. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, all the good stuff. If there's any other guests you would like to see, do let us know. But until next time, how are we going to sign out?
We're going to go swimming.
Get confident. Go swimming. He's got another Ironman to do. All right, bye-bye.